A colossal stone giant stands watch over an empty Pacific shore. How did it get there? For centuries, the method for moving Easter Island's massive Moai statues was one of history's great unsolved puzzles. These figures weigh as much as 80 tons, and their creators had no wheels, no large animals, and no metal tools. The mystery fueled stories of lost powers and even visitors from beyond our world. By the end of our journey, you will understand the brilliant, simple technique that finally cracked this ancient code. We will see how a forgotten people engineered a solution hiding in plain sight, turning myth into a working machine of stone and rope. What does true ingenuity look like when all the usual tools are taken away? This remote island is a world of its own. Rapa Nui, the name its Polynesian creators gave it, is a solitary triangle of volcanic rock, over 1,000 miles from the nearest inhabited island and 2,000 miles from the South American coast. When settlers first arrived by canoe around 800 years ago, they found a land with limited resources but boundless ambition. They brought with them a deep tradition of honoring their lineage, a belief that the wisdom and protection of those who came before was essential for the living. This belief would soon be carved into the landscape itself. The Moai were far more than stone monuments. They were the embodiment of sacred ancestors. Each massive face, with its solemn gaze and strong jawline, was believed to hold the spiritual essence or mana of a revered forebear. Once erected on a stone platform called an Ahu along the coast, the statue became a conduit, a watchful guardian channeling its power to protect and nourish the village that built it. This profound spiritual purpose is what fueled an engineering project of staggering scale. At the island's primary quarry, the crater of an extinct volcano named Raraku, the evidence of this devotion is frozen in time. Nearly 1,000 statues in every stage of completion are scattered across its slopes. Some are barely outlined in the bedrock, while others stand finished, as if waiting for their journey to begin. The largest of them, nicknamed El Gigant, lies unfinished and measures over 70 feet long, with an estimated weight of 270 tons. Just carving these figures using only stone hand tools was a generational undertaking, but that was only the first and perhaps the simplest part of the puzzle. The true test began when a completed Moai, weighing tens of tons, had to be moved miles across rugged terrain to its final coastal home. With no draft animals to pull them and no wheels to roll on, the method of their transport vanished with the island's later generations, leaving behind only the silent giants and a mystery that would taunt the modern world for centuries. The image of teams straining against ropes, dragging a stone giant over a path of logs, became the default explanation for generations. It made logical sense, borrowing from techniques seen in ancient Egypt or at Stonehenge. Yet on Easter Island, this theory quickly hit a wall of practical impossibilities. The terrain is not a flat desert or gentle plain. It is a fractured landscape of sharp volcanic rock, sudden gullies, and soft, uneven soil. Trying to roll an 80-ton cylinder over such ground would be a nightmare of stuck logs and catastrophic tipping. More damning was the evidence from the island itself. Pollen studies and soil analysis tell a story of an island that was once forested, but whose trees had largely vanished by the time the great statue construction reached its peak. The very resource required for log rollers, large straight trees, was in critically short supply. This created a paradox that baffled researchers. How could a society have moved hundreds of colossal statues using a method that relied on a resource they appear to have run out of? The logical conclusion was unsettling. Perhaps the statue cult itself contributed to the island's ecological change, a narrative that added a layer of tragedy to the mystery. With a dragging theory on shaky ground, other ideas floated in to fill the void. Some looked to local folklore, which spoke of the moai moving by their own spiritual power, walking to their platforms. While this preserved the cultural memory of movement, it offered no mechanical explanation. Other academics proposed elaborate wooden frameworks or sledges, but these concepts suffered from the same resource problem and left no archaeological trace. For decades, the field was stuck, caught between a physically improbable theory and a collection of speculative dead ends. The moai, it seemed, were destined to keep their secret. This intellectual stalemate is precisely what made the breakthrough, when it finally came, so revolutionary. It required someone to disregard the assumption that the statues moved lying down and to ask a radically different question: what if they traveled standing up? The answer was whispering in the stories all along. For generations, the Rapa Nui people had passed down accounts of the moai walking across the land, powered by the mana of the chiefs or priests. To outsiders, this was easily filed away as poetic metaphor. But what if the ancestors were being perfectly literal? Archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, working with Rapa Nui scholar Sergio Rapu, chose to listen differently. They proposed a theory so elegantly simple it seemed audacious. The statues, they argued, were engineered to walk, not with legs, of course, but through a controlled, rhythmic rocking motion. Imagine a heavy refrigerator. You don't drag it flat across the floor, you tilt it onto one corner, rock it forward, then onto the opposite corner, inching it along with a swaying gait. Now scale that concept up to an 80-ton stone giant. The idea hinged on three brilliant design features already present in the statues themselves. First, their bases were carved with a distinct forward lean. Second, their massive, protruding bellies shifted the center of gravity dramatically forward. And third, their D-shaped bases were subtly rounded, not flat. Together, these weren't just artistic choices, they were the components of a machine. The forward lean and heavy belly made the statue want to fall forward, while the rounded base provided a pivot point. The theory suggested that teams using ropes could exploit this design, pulling the statue's top from side to side, causing it to rock onto one rounded edge and then the other, walking it forward in a series of small, controlled tilts. This wasn't about brute force dragging, it was about rhythm, coordination, and harnessing physics. It transformed the moai from a dead weight into a dynamic, almost living entity, exactly as the oral histories described. But a beautiful theory is one thing, proving it with a multi-ton stone replica is another. The world was about to witness if this ancient legend could truly come to life. Look closely at the anatomy of a moai, and you start to see the blueprint for motion. These are not simply stone portraits, they are masterpieces of functional engineering. Every curve and angle serves a purpose. The most obvious clue is their posture. Unlike a person standing at attention, a moai leans aggressively forward, its massive stone head and chest projecting out over its base. This is paired with an exaggerated, barrel-shaped belly. That belly isn't just a stylistic choice, it's a carefully placed counterweight. It pulls the statue's center of gravity down and forward, making the entire form want to topple onto its face. Now, if this unstable giant were placed on a perfectly flat foundation, it would simply fall. But the carvers of Raraku were thinking several steps ahead. They gave the statues a subtle but crucial feature, a base that is convex or gently rounded like the bottom of a rocking chair. A flat base resists movement, it wants to stay put. A rounded base, however, creates a natural pivot point. Combine that rounded pivot with the forward-leaning, heavy-bellied design, and you have a structure that is built not to stand still, but to rock. With a coordinated pull, a team could tip the statue onto one rounded edge, then guide it onto the other, creating a swaying, walking rhythm. Further evidence for this controlled motion lies in small but telling details. Many unfinished statues in the quarry, and even some that were abandoned along the transport roads, have distinctive D-shaped holes carved into their bases. Researchers propose these were anchor points for strong ropes, allowing teams to not only pull the statue side to side, but also to secure it from behind, acting as a brake to prevent a catastrophic forward fall. This transforms our understanding of the carvers. They were not just artists honoring ancestors, they were brilliant physicists and kinetic sculptors. They looked at a block of volcanic tuff and saw within it a dynamic machine, a statue literally designed for the journey. The theory was a brilliant blueprint, but blueprints do not move. To convince the world, the idea needed to walk. In 2012, a bold experiment brought the ancient legend into the modern age. Archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo collaborated with engineers and a dedicated crew to put the walking hypothesis to the ultimate test. They crafted a concrete replica of a moai, a 5-ton version that captured the essential design, the forward lean, the heavy belly, and the crucial rounded base. While a fraction of the size of the largest island statues, it was still a formidable piece of stone, a tangible challenge to the centuries-old mystery. The setup was deceptively simple. They used just 3 strong ropes. 2 teams, one on each side of the statue, held ropes attached high up on the giant's head. A third team held a rope secured to the back. This rear rope was the safety line, the essential brake to prevent a forward fall. With a crew of about 18 people, they began. The side teams did not pull with constant, grinding force. Instead, they worked in a rhythm, a coordinated rocking motion. Pull from the right, and the massive stone would tilt onto its left rounded edge. Pull from the left, and it would rock onto its right edge. With each rhythmic tilt, the statue pivoted on its base, shuffling forward just a little. Pull, rock, step. Pull, rock, step. It was not a drag, it was a dance. Watching the footage is mesmerizing. The concrete giant, once an inert block, comes to life with a swaying, almost graceful gait. It moved hundreds of meters across open ground, not on a prepared track of logs, but on the actual terrain. The small crew managed it with coordinated effort, not superhuman strain. This was the proof the academic world needed. A visual demonstration that transformed an elegant theory into a working, practical method. The walking technique was not only plausible, it was efficient. It explained why the statues had their specific shape, and it finally gave a mechanical meaning to the old stories of the moai walking across the land. The experiment did more than solve an engineering puzzle. It restored a profound logic to the accomplishments of the Rapa Nui people. Their genius was not in mythical powers, but in a deep, intuitive understanding of physics and balance, turning immense stone into a partner in motion. This controlled, alternating fall is the secret heart of the movement. Think of it not as dragging a weight, but as guiding a pendulum. The teams pulling the side ropes are not providing the primary force to move the statue forward. They are simply giving it a nudge, a directional suggestion. The real engine is gravity. The statue's forward-leaning design and low center of gravity mean it is perpetually yearning to fall onto its face. Each rhythmic pull from the side teams does one critical thing. It temporarily redirects that gravitational desire. Pull from the right, and the statue obliges by tilting onto its left rounded edge, its right side lifting slightly off the ground. In that precise moment, the statue is precariously balanced on a single pivot point. The crew then pulls from the left, removing that support. The statue's own immense weight, now unsupported on that side, takes over. It falls forward a small, controlled distance, landing with a gentle thud onto its now lowered right edge. The process then repeats right, left, forward in a continuous metronomic shuffle. This is why so few people were needed in the modern experiment. They were not fighting the statue's mass, they were collaborating with it, using tiny inputs of energy to trigger a massive release of gravitational potential energy over and over again. The rear rope team is the unsung hero of this operation, the essential guide and safety. Their role is to provide just enough tension to prevent the statue from converting its forward lean into a disastrous face-first plunge. They act as both a brake and a steering mechanism, ensuring each controlled fall lands exactly where intended. It is a breathtakingly elegant system. The very things that make the moai seem immovable, their staggering weight and top-heavy design, become the core components of their locomotion. The Rapa Nui engineers did not see a problem to overcome, they saw a force of nature to be harnessed. They built a machine where the fuel was gravity, the wheels were rounded stone, and the product was a walking ancestor. But this elegant physics required a human orchestra to conduct it. Translating the walking theory into reality meant organizing a small society. To move an 80-ton statue just a few miles would have taken not just days, but likely weeks or even months of sustained, coordinated effort. This was not a task for a handful of strong individuals, it was a project for an entire clan. Estimates suggest it may have required dozens, perhaps even a few hundred people, all acting as a single, living machine. Imagine the scene on the ancient roads. Two main teams flank the giant, their hands gripping thick ropes woven from island fibers. A third team stands ready at the rear, holding the vital safety line. Their work is not constant straining, but a patient, rhythmic dance. They are waiting for the signal. That signal would have come from a chant leader or overseer, someone with a deep understanding of the statue's balance and the collective rhythm of the group. With a call, a beat on a drum, or the start of a specific line in a chant, the right side team pulls in unison. The statue rocks, the call shifts, and the left side responds. Each pull is precise, each recovery controlled. The soundscape itself would have been a tool, a layer of rhythm over the deep, grinding thud of stone meeting earth. The coordinated chants did more than keep time. They unified breath and effort, turning exhausting labor into a shared, almost meditative ritual. This transforms our understanding of the entire endeavor. The walk was not merely a logistical step between carving and erecting. It was the central, living ceremony. For the clan participating, it was the moment they physically guided their ancestors' embodiment across the land they protected. Each rocking step made the spiritual connection tangible, a powerful, visible demonstration of their collective identity and devotion. The journey bonded the community, proving their strength and unity with every slow, deliberate shuffle toward the coast. The statue did not arrive at its platform as a passive object. It arrived charged with the energy and purpose of the entire procession. Yet even the most brilliant physics requires a physical connection. The walking method's control system was not made of stone but of fiber. Ropes were the unsung technology, the vital interface between human intention and colossal weight. Without them, the statue would remain an inert, unstable mass, impossible to guide or stabilize. But the Rapa Nui faced the same environmental constraint here as with the log theory. They lacked the large, straight trees found elsewhere in Polynesia that were ideal for making thick, heavy cables. So they looked to what their island did provide, a resilient native flora perfectly suited for the task. Two plants became the cornerstone of this ancient engineering. The hau tree, a type of hibiscus, yielded a tough, fibrous bark. More importantly, the mahut plant, a paper mulberry, produced a softer but remarkably strong inner bark. Through a labor-intensive process of soaking, beating, and twisting, these fibers could be transformed into braided cordage of astonishing strength. Creating rope thick enough to handle an 80-ton statue was not a casual side project, it was a major industry. It demanded vast quantities of plant material, requiring careful cultivation and harvesting cycles to ensure a sustainable supply. It also called for specialized knowledge, the skill to braid multiple strands into a unified cable that would not snap under immense shifting tension. This rope making was a quiet, foundational craft that made the spectacular public ceremony of the walk possible. Think of these ropes not as simple tools, but as the steering and braking systems of a living machine. They were the literal lifelines. The teams on the sides used them to input the gentle, rhythmic nudges that set the statue rocking. The team at the rear used theirs as a dynamic control, constantly adjusting tension to act as a brake against a forward fall and to help steer the direction of each rocking step. A single snapped rope during a walk could mean disaster, sending the statue crashing irreparably onto its face. Therefore, the quality and durability of this cordage was a matter of communal safety and success. This focus on rope reveals a deeper layer of Rapa Nui ingenuity. They did not lament the absence of large timber, they innovated with what they had. They turned flexible stems and bark into the key technology that tamed stone, a profound adaptation that turned local limitation into a unique strength. The true monument was not just the statue that walked, but the collective knowledge that grew from the ground up and guided it every step of the way. The journey from quarry to coast was a slow pilgrimage across the island's bones. To reach their sacred platforms, some moai had to walk over 11 miles, a distance that seems unimaginable for a stone giant. Yet the walking method transformed this challenge from an impossible haul into a navigable, even strategic procession. Unlike dragging a statue on a sledge, which demands a perfectly flat, obstacle-free highway, a rocking moai could handle the island's real, uneven geography. Its shuffling, pivoting gait allowed it to step over low outcrops of volcanic rock and traverse gentle slopes that would have stalled a dragged load completely. The statue's own rocking motion helped it negotiate the land, each controlled fall carrying it forward over minor imperfections in the path. This was movement in dialogue with the terrain, not a war against it. The evidence for these epic journeys is still etched into the earth. Archaeologists mapping the island have identified ancient roads, some still visible, radiating out from the slopes of Raraku like spokes from a hub. These are not wide, flat boulevards. Many are V-shaped in cross-section or feature a central, worn groove. For years, these features were thought to be tracks for sledges, scars left by log rollers. But viewed through the lens of the walking hypothesis, their story changes. A V-shaped path or a central groove could have served as a guide, a subtle channel that helped keep the statue's shuffling, side-to-side motion on course during its long, ceremonial march. These pathways are not scars but sacred trails. They are the fossilized footprints of the walks, worn smooth not by wheels or logs, but by the rhythmic, earth-tamping steps of countless stone ancestors and the communities that guided them. Each groove is a silent witness, a permanent record of patience, coordination, and belief written directly onto the landscape. Every journey needs its final stage, a place of arrival that gives meaning to the entire passage. For the walking moai, that destination was the Ahu, the immense stone platform lining the island's coast. These were not mere pedestals or simple foundations. They were the sacred theaters where the statue's spiritual purpose would be fulfilled. After its long, rhythmic walk across the island, the moai would arrive at the base of its Ahu, a wall of fitted stone blocks that could stand over 15 feet high. The final and most delicate engineering challenge now began: how to transform this reclining traveler, still leaning on its side from the walk, into an upright sentinel gazing over its people. The solution was a clever marriage of leverage and patience. Builders likely constructed a temporary earthen and stone ramp against the front of the Ahu, creating an inclined plane. Using the same strong ropes that guided the walk, crews would have employed a technique known as parbuckling. This involves looping ropes around the statue and using its own immense weight as an advantage. By pulling from the top of the platform, teams could slowly, incrementally pivot the giant on its rounded base, rocking it upward degree by terrifying degree. It was a controlled reversal of the walking motion, using gravity and leverage to coax the ancestor into its final, vertical position. The sound must have been immense, a deep, grinding groan of stone as the statue's weight settled onto the perfectly leveled platform prepared for it. With the moai finally standing, its blank eyes were ceremonially inlaid with white coral and obsidian, a ritual called opening the eyes that was believed to awaken the ancestor's spiritual presence. The walk was complete, but the Ahu's role was far from over. These platforms were precisely aligned with celestial events, oriented to catch the rising sun of the solstices or the movements of important stars. This suggests the statue's ceremonial walk and raising were likely timed with these cosmic cycles, embedding the entire process with profound cosmological meaning. The moai was not just placed on the land, it was connected to the heavens, its journey a ritual that wove together community, ancestor, and cosmos into a single, powerful statement of belonging and protection. The elegance of the walking theory, however, did not silence all questions. In the world of archaeology, a good idea is not one that ends discussion, but one that sparks a deeper, more rigorous search for truth. The walking hypothesis, for all its compelling demonstrations, has faced thoughtful and necessary criticism from other scholars. This debate is not a sign of failure, but a vital part of the scientific process, pushing everyone to look closer and think harder. One major point of contention is scale. The successful 2012 experiment used a concrete replica weighing 5 tons. Critics rightly ask whether the graceful, controlled rocking scene in that test could be safely replicated with a true moai, some of which weigh 16 times that much. The forces involved in tipping an 80-ton block of stone are exponentially greater. Could the statue's own rounded base, the very pivot point of the method, withstand the immense, repetitive stress without cracking or crumbling? A single catastrophic failure during a walk would mean more than a fallen statue. It could mean the loss of generations of sacred work and cultural meaning. This scaling problem remains a central challenge for proponents of the theory, one that requires more than a physical demonstration. It demands sophisticated engineering analysis and perhaps even computer modeling to fully understand the limits of the stone itself. Other researchers point back to the ancient roads. They note the distinct linear grooves worn into some pathways and argue this pattern is more consistent with something being dragged in a straight line, not rocked from side to side. Furthermore, several statues were discovered abandoned on these transport roads, lying flat on their faces. Critics of the walking method suggest this position is exactly what you would expect if a statue being dragged on its back broke free from its ropes and tumbled forward. If it had fallen from a walking position, they argue, it would more likely have toppled onto its side. Each piece of evidence becomes a clue in a centuries-old cold case, open to multiple interpretations. This ongoing scholarly conversation is precisely what moves understanding forward. It compels researchers to examine the wear patterns on road stones with new tools, to analyze the fracture points on fallen statues for clues about their final moments, and to continue refining their models. The goal is not to prove one side definitively right or wrong, but to piece together the most complete, nuanced picture of the past possible. The debate itself honors the Rapa Nui people, acknowledging that their solution was sophisticated enough to keep us questioning and searching for generations. To answer the critics of scale, science has built a virtual laboratory. Researchers now employ advanced physics engines and computer simulations to model the immense forces acting on a full-sized walking moai. These digital tools can process thousands of variables in an instant, testing different rope tensions, precise pull angles, ground friction, and the exact geometry of each unique statue. The simulations search for weak points, predicting whether volcanic tuff might crack under the rhythmic stress or how a slight miscalculation in the crew's timing could lead to a catastrophic topple. This is digital archaeology, a way to experiment with history without risking the destruction of an irreplaceable artifact. Early results from these complex models have been cautiously supportive. They indicate that with a sufficiently large and well-coordinated crew, applying force in the correct rhythmic sequence, the walking method is indeed mechanically feasible even for the largest statues. The simulations suggest the rounded base, far from being a liability, was a robust pivot engineered to distribute those incredible stresses. This virtual testing ground provides a crucial new layer of evidence, bridging the gap between the small-scale physical experiment and the monumental reality of the ancient island. It allows us to explore scenarios that would be impossible to recreate today, like moving an 80-ton giant across a specific type of soft soil or up a gentle incline. Each simulation run is like rewinding time, offering a glimpse into the precise, practiced choreography that turned a perilous physics problem into a repeatable ceremony. The computers are not solving the mystery for us, but they are confirming that the solution proposed by the ancestors and demonstrated by modern researchers rests on a foundation of solid, predictable physical law. The most powerful evidence for the walking theory may not lie in physics or simulation, but in the stories kept alive for centuries. Rapa Nui oral tradition, passed from elder to child through generations, holds a consistent and specific claim that the Moai walked across the land. They did not say the ancestors dragged the statues or rolled them or floated them. They said the stone giants walked, powered by the spiritual force known as mana. For a long time, Western researchers heard these legends and saw only metaphor, a beautiful allegory for spiritual power moving through the landscape. The walking hypothesis forces a radical reinterpretation. What if the people were being perfectly, literally accurate? This transforms the stories from myth into something far more valuable: preserved technical memory. The method of transport was so central, so spectacular, and so demanding of communal effort that it became embedded in the culture's foundational narratives. The legend of the walking Moai was not a fanciful tale invented later. It was the living record of how it was done, a user manual encoded in poetry and passed down through song. This creates a profound bridge between two ways of knowing. For decades, empirical science and indigenous knowledge were seen as separate, even conflicting, paths to the past. Here, they converge on the same elegant truth. The engineering model derived from physics and experiment arrives at the same conclusion as the cultural memory preserved through story. The descendants of the statue builders held the answer all along, not in academic journals but in the tales told by firelight. This teaches us a humbling lesson in how we listen to history. We often search for answers in the dirt, which is vital, but we can sometimes overlook the answers carried on the breath of living communities. The Rapa Nui did not forget how their ancestors achieved the impossible. They simply remembered it in the language of their culture, a language we are only now learning to hear with the respect it deserves. The ingenuity of the Moai walk invites a wider question. How does this solution compare to other ancient feats of moving the immovable? Around the world, human cultures faced the same fundamental challenge, and their answers reveal a fascinating spectrum of engineering philosophy. In ancient Egypt, the transport of massive obelisks was a monumental logistical operation. These stone needles, some weighing over 400 tons, were first quarried and then dragged to the Nile River on enormous sledges. Their journey continued on specially built barges, floating them to their destination. The final act, the raising, involved an ingenious but labor-intensive process of pulling the obelisk up a giant earthen ramp and then carefully lowering it into a waiting pit, allowing it to pivot into a vertical position. It was a triumph of coordinated labor and abundant resources. Similarly, in medieval Europe, Moving colossal church bells or granite columns often involved constructing elaborate wooden frameworks or cradles, placing the object on rolling logs or even large wooden wheels, and hauling it with teams of oxen. These methods relied on external structures, on creating a separate machine to carry the weight. The Rapa Nui approach stands in stark, elegant contrast. They built the machine into the statue itself. There was no separate sledge, no floating barge, no rolling cradle. The statue's forward lean, rounded base, and low center of gravity were not just artistic features, they were the core components of the transport system. The ropes and the coordinated human crew were the only external inputs needed to activate this stone machine. This is engineering minimalism of the highest order. It emerges not from a lack of capability, but from a profound adaptation to circumstance. On their remote island, large timber for big frameworks was scarce, and there were no rivers for barge transport, no oxen for heavy pulling. The Rapa Nui engineers had to work with a very short list of available materials: stone, rope, and human coordination. From that short list, they distilled a solution of breathtaking purity. This places their achievement in a special category of human innovation, the kind born from extreme constraint. When you cannot build a complex machine around a problem, you must find a way to make the problem itself become the machine. The walking moai is a powerful testament to that principle, a reminder that sometimes the most sophisticated answer is also the simplest one, hiding in the very shape of the challenge. For decades, the story of Easter Island carried a dark and cautionary moral. It was presented as the ultimate parable of human folly, a society so obsessed with carving giant statues that it cut down every last tree to move them, triggering an ecological and social death spiral. This narrative of self-inflicted collapse, often called Ecocide, painted the Rapa Nui people as architects of their own downfall, a warning from history about the perils of environmental mismanagement. It is a powerful story, but the walking theory of moai transport forces us to question its very foundation. If the statues did not require forests of logs to roll them, then the primary driver for that deforestation vanishes. The entire tragic timeline unravels. This is not just about solving an engineering puzzle, it is about restoring the narrative of a people. The evidence suggests a different, more complex reality. Moving the moai by walking them required a specific kind of resource, not massive timber, but vast quantities of strong fiber from plants like the paper mulberry for ropes. It also required some wood for levers, tools, and perhaps the ramps used in raising, but these were projects of a far smaller scale. The clearing of the island's palm forests, then, likely stemmed from a combination of long-term, everyday needs, clearing land for sweet potato gardens to feed a growing population, using wood for cooking fires and building homes, and most critically, for constructing the large seagoing canoes essential for deep-sea fishing. This was a gradual process of living on a small, remote island over many centuries, not a sudden, frantic raid on the ecosystem for statue-moving logs. This reframing is profound. It transforms the Rapa Nui from reckless destroyers into what they always were, resilient and ingenious adapters. They faced the same environmental constraints we all do, but their response was to innovate a stunningly efficient method of monumental construction that worked in harmony with, not in opposition to, their island's true resources. Their legacy is not one of failure, but of brilliant adaptation under pressure. These fallen giants tell a story the finished statues cannot. Scattered along the ancient roads, particularly on the slopes leading away from the quarry, lie the moai that never reached their coastal homes. They rest where they last fell, sometimes miles from Rongorongo, silent witnesses to a process interrupted. These abandoned statues, often called road moai, are not failures to the archaeologist. They are frozen moments in time, archaeological snapshots that capture the transport method in action. Their positions are a form of ancient data, each angle and orientation a clue waiting to be read. Some lie dramatically face down, their massive features pressed into the earth. This prone position is a powerful piece of evidence. If the statues were being dragged on their backs on a sledge or log rollers, a catastrophic accident would likely leave them on their side or back. A statue falling forward from a standing, rocking position, however, would land exactly like this, in a final, permanent embrace with the ground. This lends strong support to the walking hypothesis, suggesting these particular giants stumbled during their rhythmic gait and could not be righted. Other road moai are found in more ambiguous poses, tilted at angles or partially embedded in the roadside embankment. These positions might indicate a moment of controlled maneuvering, perhaps an attempt to navigate a tricky part of the path or to pivot the statue for a change in direction. They show the process was not a simple, straight-line march, but a dynamic navigation full of careful adjustments. Studying these permanent pauses is as crucial as studying the triumphant arrivals. A successful walk leaves little trace beyond a worn path, but a failure leaves a detailed record of the precise moment things went wrong. These fallen giants reveal the points of maximum risk, the moments where coordination faltered or the stone met an unexpected weakness in the ground. They highlight the immense challenges of the terrain itself, showing where a slope proved too steep or the soil too soft to support the next rocking step. Perhaps most poignantly, they may hint at the human stories behind the stone. A statue abandoned far from the quarry might signal a shift in political power, the passing of a guiding leader, or a communal decision to redirect resources during a time of hardship. Each road moai is a question mark, a story that ended before its ceremonial conclusion. Yet in their stillness, they offer some of the most moving and informative chapters in the entire epic of Easter Island. Raraku was not just a workshop, it was a nursery for stone giants. The soft volcanic tuff of this crater wall offered the perfect canvas, and the carvers began their work where the material lived. A master sculptor would first outline the shape of the moai directly onto the cliff face. Teams then followed, using hand picks made of harder basalt stone to chip away the rock, gradually freeing the statue's form. They worked from the top down, carving the distinctive elongated head, the strong brow ridge, and the solemn face while the giant was still part of the mountain, lying on its back. This position was a practical necessity, allowing the carvers to shape the most detailed features without the constant threat of the massive block tipping over. It also meant the statue's back remained attached to the bedrock, a natural support until the very last moment of its birth. The scale of this operation is still visible today. Walking the slopes of Raraku feels like wandering through a dreamscape of half-formed beings. Some are mere suggestions in the rock, while others are nearly complete, their sharp noses and thin lips awaiting the command to begin their journey. This phase could take a team of skilled workers over a year for a single large statue, a testament to patience and shared purpose, yet the carving was only the prelude. The true test of nerve came next, the moment of separation. Before a statue could walk, it first had to stand free. With the carving complete, the sculptors performed a delicate operation. They began to undercut the statue's back, carefully chiseling away the rock that connected it to the crater wall. They left just a narrow keel of stone, a final umbilical cord. At this point, the giant was precariously balanced, held in place by that thin spine of rock and by a temporary support of stones piled beneath it. The next step was to sever that final connection and guide the multi-ton figure down the interior slope of the crater. This was arguably the most dangerous part of the entire process. Using strong ropes anchored above, crews would cut the keel. As the statue broke free, teams on those ropes would control its descent, lowering it down a prepared earthen ramp that led to the quarry floor. The sound must have been thunderous, a deep crack followed by the grinding slide of stone on earth, all held in check by human strength and carefully calculated angles. A mistake here meant a shattered monument and likely a terrible loss of life. Success, however, transformed the statue's very nature. In that moment, it ceased to be a part of the landscape and became an individual entity. It was now a dynamic object, resting on the rounded base that had been carved while it lay prone, ready for the ropes that would not lower it but rock it forward. The quarry was the place of its making, but the walk would be the ceremony of its life. This transition from static mountain to mobile ancestor was the first and most crucial step in a ritual that blended geology, engineering, and profound belief into a single, continuous act of creation. The statue's arrival at the Ahu was a moment of both triumph and tension. After its long, rhythmic walk, the giant now lay on its side at the base of the immense stone platform, its journey only half complete. The final and most delicate act of engineering now began, a vertical dance against gravity that would transform the traveling stone into an eternal sentinel. This was not a task of raw power, but of meticulous, incremental control. The solution was a temporary mountain of earth and rubble, a ramp built directly against the front of the Ahu, rising to meet the top of the platform. This ramp became the stage for the raising ceremony, a carefully engineered slope that turned an impossible vertical lift into a manageable series of small, calculated tilts. The method relied on a clever principle of leverage known as parbuckling. Imagine trying to stand a heavy book upright on a table by sliding it from its side. You wouldn't lift it, you'd tilt it, using one edge as a pivot. The Rapa Nui engineers applied this concept on a monumental scale. Using strong ropes looped around the reclining statue, teams positioned at the top of the Ahu would pull. This pull, combined with teams using long wooden levers at the base, would coax the giant to rock forward a few degrees. The instant it moved, other workers would rush to slide prepared stone supports underneath the newly created space, locking in that tiny gain of height. Then the process would repeat: pull, rock, slide a support, pull again. Each cycle inched the statue upward along the ramp, its rounded base allowing it to pivot smoothly on the temporary stone fulcrums. The sound must have been a symphony of strain, the deep groan of shifting stone, the taut hum of ropes, the shouted coordination of the crews. This was an operation of breathtaking risk, where a single slipped rope or a poorly placed stone could send generations of work crashing down in an instant. The successful raising of a moai was therefore the ultimate testament to communal trust and precision, a physical manifestation of a society working in perfect harmony to achieve the seemingly divine. And with the statue finally standing tall on its Ahu, its blank eyes gazing inland, one final piece of the ritual remained. High in a separate quarry, workers had carved massive cylinders of red volcanic rock, some weighing over 10 tons. These were the Pukau, the distinctive topknots that crowned many of the statues. The method for lifting these cylinders to the top of a moai, which could be over 30 feet in the air, remains a subject of debate, but it likely involved another earthen ramp built directly behind the now vertical statue. Using the same principles of ropes, levers, and patience, the red stone would be rolled up this second ramp and then carefully maneuvered onto the statue's head. The placement of the Pukau was the final act of consecration, the last piece of a ritual years in the making. In that moment, the transformation was complete. The stone from the quarry walked across the land and raised toward the sky, now stood fully formed, a watchful ancestor permanently fused with the landscape, its journey from mountain to monument a permanent echo of the community's devotion and ingenuity. But the statue was not yet complete. After the immense effort of raising the moai onto its platform, a final, symbolic piece remained. High atop the heads of many of the most prominent statues rests a massive, cylindrical stone hat known as a Pukau. Carved from a distinctive red volcanic rock called scoria, These topknots could weigh as much as 12 tons, and they originated at a completely separate quarry named Pukau, located miles from both the main statue quarry and the coastal platforms. This presented the Rapa Nui with a secondary, equally daunting transport puzzle, a smaller but incredibly dense object that needed its own journey and its own ingenious method of ascension. The leading theory for moving the Pukau is one of controlled rolling. Their cylindrical shape is a major clue. Unlike the statues, which were designed to rock, these stout cylinders could have been rolled efficiently, either end over end like a barrel or on their curved sides along a prepared path. This method would have required far fewer people than moving a moai, turning a 12-ton weight into a manageable, kinetic object that could be guided across the island's roads. Once a Pukau arrived at the base of its waiting moai, however, the real challenge began. The statue now stood upright, perhaps 30 feet tall. Hoisting a multi-ton stone cylinder to that height and then balancing it perfectly on the statue's head seems like a task of almost magical difficulty. The likely solution was another ramp, but one used in a very specific way. Researchers propose a technique sometimes called coral rock walking. Imagine the Pukau placed at the bottom of a long, gradual earthen ramp built directly against the back of the Ahu and the statue. Instead of dragging it straight up, crews would have used ropes to rock the cylinder, pivoting it up the incline in a series of small, alternating lifts. With each controlled tilt, workers would slide stones or wooden supports underneath to hold the new, slightly higher position. Rock, support, lift, repeat. It was a slow, patient vertical dance, a close cousin to the method used to raise the statue itself, but adapted for a rounded, rolling object. The final placement was an act of breathtaking precision. Maneuvering the Pukau onto the flat top of the moai's head and securing it there, likely using stone wedges, required an intimate understanding of balance and center of gravity. The symbolism of this crowning act was profound. The red stone may have represented a sacred hairstyle, a top knot worn by high-status individuals, or a ceremonial headdress. Placing it was the ultimate mark of completion and status, transforming an ancestor figure into a fully realized, high-ranking authority. This final layer of engineering demonstrates that the Rapa Nui mastery was not a single trick, but a versatile toolkit of physics. They understood how to make a giant walk, how to pivot it upright, and how to roll and lift a dense cylinder to its summit. Each phase demanded a different application of the same principles: leverage, controlled falling, and the patient conversion of small human efforts into massive stone movement. The Pukau was not an afterthought. It was the exclamation point on a sentence written in stone, a declaration that their ingenuity reached from the ground to the sky. Yet the island held another, even more elusive form of memory. Alongside the silent stone giants, the Rapa Nui left behind a whisper of language, carved into wooden tablets in a script known as Rongorongo. To this day, these intricate glyphs of birds, plants, and geometric forms remain undeciphered, one of the world's last great unbroken codes. While none of the 24 surviving tablets are thought to be technical manuals detailing statue transport, they represent something profound, a formal system for recording knowledge. This fact opens a haunting possibility. The precise engineering methods, the specific rope knots that could bear 80 tons, the exact chants that kept 200 people in perfect rhythm, the astronomical charts for aligning the Ahu, all of this intricate, hard-won understanding may have once been written down. It was a living library of cultural technique, carved into wood rather than etched in stone. The societal changes that swept the island in the centuries after European contact led to a devastating rupture. With the passing of elders and the profound cultural disruptions of that era, the ability to read Rongorongo faded away. The wooden tablets survived, but their meaning became a locked door. In that loss, a process that was once a celebrated communal ceremony, as well understood as building a canoe or planting a field, transformed overnight into an impenetrable mystery. The sophisticated became the supernatural. The walking theory we have explored then is more than an academic exercise. It is a form of archaeological translation, a recovery of that lost intellectual heritage, not through a decoder ring for glyphs, but through the universal language of physics and experiment. Each rhythmic pull on the replica's ropes, each calculated tilt, is like sounding out a syllable of a forgotten word. By proving the method's feasibility, we are not claiming to have found an ancient instruction sheet, but we are effectively reading between the lines of the landscape itself. We are reconstructing the chapter of the Rapa Nui story that their own written records can no longer, for now, tell us. It is a reminder that knowledge is fragile, and that the greatest monuments a culture builds are often not made of stone, but of ideas passed from one mind to another, a chain that is so easily broken. The walking theory has stepped out of academic journals and into the living culture of the island itself. On Rapa Nui today, the idea that the ancestors made the statues walk is not just a hypothesis, it is a source of profound pride and reconnection. For many in the community, the elegant physics validated by modern experiments feels like a long-awaited translation, turning the poetic language of their oral histories into a language of global understanding. It confirms that their forebears were not mystical or reckless, but were instead brilliant engineers whose solutions have stood the test of time and science. This validation has sparked a powerful cultural revival, one that actively weaves the past into the present. Local cultural groups now stage demonstrations and performances that showcase the walking method, using scaled models or even choreographed human movements to illustrate the rhythmic, coordinated process for visitors. These are not mere reenactments, they are acts of storytelling and identity. They transform a theoretical concept into a shared, visceral experience, allowing both islanders and guests to feel, if only for a moment, the collective effort and intelligence embedded in those ancient walks. This revival serves a vital dual purpose. For the outside world, it attracts a new kind of tourism, one centered on deep respect and a desire to learn the true history, moving beyond simplistic myths of collapse. Visitors come not just to see silent stone faces, but to understand the living minds that moved them. For the Rapa Nui people, this active engagement is even more significant. It strengthens cultural identity by reconnecting them with a tangible, demonstrable aspect of their ancestral prowess. The knowledge is no longer lost or debated by outsiders alone. It is actively reclaimed, performed, and taught by the descendants themselves. In this way, the Moai are undergoing a second transformation. They are shifting from being passive relics of a so-called lost civilization, objects of distant curiosity, into active symbols of enduring ingenuity. They become teachers, their very form a lesson in physics, cooperation, and adaptation that speaks across the centuries. This cultural embrace completes the circle that began with an experiment. A theory born from listening to old stories and testing them with ropes and replicas has returned home, enriching those very stories with new layers of meaning and ensuring they will walk confidently into the future. The story of the walking Moai is more than just a solved puzzle. It is a masterclass in how to think about the past. This breakthrough did not come from a single brilliant mind working in isolation, but from a vibrant conversation across disciplines. Archaeologists provided the context of the landscape and the artifacts. Ethnographers listened deeply to the oral histories passed down through generations. Physicists and engineers then translated those stories into testable models of force and motion. Each field spoke a different language, but together they translated a centuries-old legend into a working, physical reality. This collaborative model proves that the grandest mysteries of history are often locked boxes requiring multiple keys to open. It moves archaeology beyond the careful study of objects in the ground and into the dynamic realm of testing how those objects were actually used. A hypothesis is no longer just an elegant idea in a paper. It is a call to action, an invitation to tie ropes to concrete and see if the stones will dance. This shift from pure theory to practical experiment brings the past to life in a profoundly tangible way. It allows us to feel the weight of the challenge and witness the elegance of the solution with our own eyes, transforming abstract academic debate into shared human discovery. Perhaps the most profound lesson, however, lies in how we listen. For too long, many academic traditions viewed indigenous oral histories as colorful folklore, rich in cultural meaning but poor in factual detail. The Walking Moai case flips that assumption entirely. Here, the oral tradition was not a metaphor, it was a precise technical description. The Rapa Nui people had preserved the truth of their ancestors' achievement in the very structure of their stories, waiting for the world to develop the humility to hear it literally. This should echo through the halls of archaeology and history. It asks researchers to approach the narratives of living cultures not as secondary sources to be corroborated, but as primary sources of encoded knowledge. These stories are often the direct intellectual inheritance of the people who built the wonders we study. From the stone circles of Europe to the massive earthworks of the Americas, countless ancient sites are shrouded in similar mystery. What if their secrets are also preserved, not in undiscovered scrolls, but in the songs and stories of the descendant communities? The Walking Moai stands as a powerful testament, urging us to listen with new ears. It proves that sometimes the most advanced technology needed to understand the past is not a ground-penetrating radar or a particle accelerator, but simple, respectful attention. When we combine that listening with rigorous science and hands-on testing, we don't just solve puzzles, we rebuild bridges to human ingenuity across time. The most compelling theories always leave room for wonder. While the walking model provides a powerful and elegant solution, it does not close the book on Easter Island's story. It simply opens a new chapter filled with even more precise questions. The broad strokes of the method are clear, but the fine details, the specific techniques perfected over generations, remain tantalizingly out of reach. For instance, we understand the need for ropes, but we do not know their exact configuration. How were they attached to the statues? Were they looped through the D-shaped holes seen in some bases, or were they tied around the neck and torso in a specific harness pattern? The exact knots used by the Rapa Nui, capable of holding 80 tons of shifting force without slipping or snapping, represent a lost art of practical engineering. Each of these small unknowns is a piece of the cultural fingerprint left behind by the statue walkers. Then there is the question of the giants among giants. The walking method has been demonstrated beautifully with a 5-ton replica, and simulations support its feasibility for statues of average size. But what of the true titans, like the 270-ton Colossus still lying in the quarry? Could even the most perfectly coordinated crew have safely rocked a mass that immense without the stone base crumbling under the phenomenal stress? It is possible that the very largest moai were never intended to leave the quarry, serving instead as eternal monuments within the sacred crater itself. Or perhaps they represent an ambition that pushed the known method to its absolute limit, a project that was ultimately abandoned when the risks became too great. This boundary between what was possible and what was attempted remains a fuzzy line on the map of history. The pursuit of answers is now driven by technology that would seem like magic to the original builders. Researchers are using tools like LiDAR, which uses laser pulses to map the ground surface with incredible precision, even through dense vegetation. Scanning the ancient transport roads with this technology could reveal subtle, human-made features invisible to the naked eye, slight banking on curves or worn depressions that perfectly match the swaying path of a walking statue rather than the straight track of a drag. Another promising avenue lies in the statues themselves. A careful, microscopic examination of the wear patterns on the rounded bases of moai, especially those that fell during transport, could provide the smoking gun. Distinctive polishing or striations in a consistent, alternating pattern would be the direct physical signature of a rocking motion, the stone's own testimony to its journey. Every fallen statue along the road is a frozen moment, an archaeological crime scene waiting for its story to be told. Future excavations around these sites could uncover the very stones used as temporary pivots or the post holes where guide ropes were anchored, offering a snapshot of the transport process interrupted. This work is delicate and slow, a conversation with the earth where each handful of soil is a potential sentence in a long narrative. The mystery of Easter Island is no longer a static puzzle with a single missing piece. It is a dynamic field of study that continues to evolve. Each answered question gives rise to two more, inviting a new generation of explorers, from archaeologists and engineers to the Rapa Nui community itself, to contribute their voices. The story of the moai is still being written, not in stone, but through the persistent collective curiosity of those who look at these silent giants and still hear the echo of a question: how did you do it? The search for that answer is a journey that honors the past by refusing to believe its secrets are ever truly lost. That final insight is what makes this story resonate far beyond a remote Pacific island. The true legacy of the Rapa Nui is not locked in their quarries or platforms, but in their process. It is a masterclass in innovation born from necessity. They faced a challenge with a seemingly impossible checklist: move a multi-ton stone giant for miles without wheels, large animals, or abundant timber. The world's other ancient cultures might have offered them a blueprint, but those blueprints required resources they simply did not have. So they did something extraordinary. They looked at the problem itself and saw the solution hiding inside it. They did not try to force the statue to conform to an external machine. They engineered the statue to become the machine. This is the heart of their genius. They observed the fundamental properties of their materials: the forward pull of a rounded base, the pivot of a heavy belly, the tensile strength of braided plant fiber. Then they asked a revolutionary question: how can we make these properties work for us? Their answer was to collaborate with physics, to use gravity as their engine and balance as their guide. In doing so, they transformed a constraint, the very weight and instability of the stone, into the central mechanism for its movement. This teaches us a powerful principle that echoes through human history. The most profound breakthroughs often emerge not from abundance but from limitation. When the usual tools are taken away, we are forced to think more deeply, to understand the essence of the problem, and to discover solutions that are more elegant, more efficient, and more uniquely fitted to our world. The Rapa Nui walkers remind us that innovation is not always about inventing something new from nothing. It can be about seeing the hidden potential in what is already right in front of you. Their greatest monument, therefore, is not the silent stone faces gazing inland. It is the enduring idea that within every great challenge lies the seed of its own solution, waiting for a curious and resilient mind to bring it to life. Their journey from mountain to monument was a conversation between stone and spirit. The silent slopes of Raraku were not merely a workshop, but a birthplace where each giant was coaxed from the living rock with a sacred purpose. Their subsequent trek across the island was not a grim engineering slog, but a rhythmic communal procession, a walking ceremony that activated their spiritual role. To see the moai only as artifacts is to miss half their story. They are the dynamic results of that ceremony, frozen in their final, watchful poses, yet still humming with the memory of movement. The ingenious method of walking them, that controlled, rhythmic rocking, stands as a stunning testament to a different kind of intelligence. It was an intelligence born of deep observation, of understanding how to collaborate with gravity and balance rather than fight against them. This revelation does more than solve a technical puzzle. It fundamentally rewrites the narrative of Easter Island. It dispels the old, tragic myth of a society that foolishly destroyed its environment for its statues. In its place, we find a story of brilliant adaptation. The Rapa Nui people did not have the resources others might have used, so they engineered a solution from the very constraints they faced, using fiber, stone, and human coordination to achieve the seemingly impossible. Their achievement speaks of incredible social cohesion, of hundreds of individuals moving as one organism, guided by chance and shared belief. When we look upon these giants now, we see more than mysterious stone faces. We see the culmination of a walking ritual. We see the proof of a community that could turn a colossal challenge into a shared spiritual and technological triumph. Their silent vigil along the coast is a permanent reminder of what becomes possible when human ingenuity is directed by a unified purpose. The echo of their walk through history carries a simple, powerful lesson. Sometimes the answers of the past are not buried in lost manuscripts or hidden chambers. They are waiting in the stories passed down, in the shape of the stones themselves, and in our willingness to listen, to experiment, and to look at an ancient mystery from a fresh, respectful perspective.